The auction notice arrived on a Tuesday. Margaret Walsh held the paper in her weathered hands, reading the words that might as well have been a death sentence. Public auction of property minus 247 acres. Improvements included October 15th. 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to lose everything she and David had built over 30 years of marriage. She sat at the kitchen table, the same scarred oak where they'd shared breakfast every morning until the cancer took him 6 months ago. The house felt too big now, too quiet except for the wind that rattled the old windows and the creak of floorboards settling. Through the window, she could see the barn David had rebuilt after the tornado in '09, the chicken coop they'd constructed. Together, the fields where they'd grown corn and soybeans, and hoped all of it about to belong to someone else. Margaret was 55, but felt 70. Her hands ached from arthritis. Her back protested every morning when she climbed out of bed. The medical bills from David's final months had drained their savings, and the bank had finally lost patience. She'd tried to keep up with the payments. But running a farm alone when you could barely afford seed, when equipment broke down and you couldn't fix it, when your body betrayed you a little more each day, it was impossible. The knock at the door startled her. Through the window, she saw Tom Brennan's silver Lexus in her driveway. Her stomach clenched. Tom owned Brennan Development, the company that had been buying up farmland around the county for the past 5 years, turning family farms into strip malls and housing developments. He'd made David 3 offers before the cancer diagnosis. All refused. Margaret opened the door but didn't invite him in. Tom smiled, his teeth too white, his suit too expensive for a Tuesday afternoon in rural Iowa. Margaret, I heard about the auction. I'm sorry it's come to this. Are you? His smile didn't waver. I want to make you an offer. Private sale before the auction. You'll get more money. Avoid the embarrassment of, how much? 200,000 cash. You could buy a nice condo in town, live comfortably. This land is worth 4 times that. Was worth that. Before you let it go to seed. Before the equipment rusted. Before, he caught himself. I'm trying to help you, Margaret. Take the offer. Walk away with your dignity. She closed the door in his face. Through the window, she watched him drive away, his taillights disappearing down the gravel road. Dignity. As if there was dignity in surrender. As if 30 years of sweat and love could be measured in cash and condo square footage. That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. She walked through the house, touching things. The quilt David's mother had made them as a wedding gift. The photos on the mantel their wedding day, the first harvest, David holding their stillborn daughter 23 years ago. They'd tried for more children after that, but it never happened. The farm became their child, the land their legacy. Now, even that would be gone. At dawn, she went outside to feed the chickens. She had 12 left, down from 50. She'd sold most of them to pay the electric bill. The remaining birds clucked and pecked at the feed she scattered, oblivious to the fact that in 3 weeks, they'd belong to someone else too. She was closing. The co-op when she saw him. A man stood at the edge of her property, near the tree line that bordered the county road. Tall, lean, wearing a faded green jacket and carrying a backpack. Even from a distance, she could see he was watching her. Margaret's heart hammered. They were 3 miles from the nearest neighbor. She'd heard stories about drifters, about robberies, about worse things. The man started walking toward her. She moved quickly for the house, but her hip protested, slowing her down. She was still 20 yards from the porch when he called out, "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you." His voice was rough, but not threatening. Margaret stopped, turned. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd thought, maybe 40, with dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes that had seen things. Hard things. His clothes were worn but clean. Military bearing in his posture. "I'm not buying anything," she said. "I'm not selling." He stopped a respectful distance away. "I'm looking for work. Farm work. I can do repairs, animal care, field work. Whatever you need. I can't pay. Food and a place to sleep would be enough." Margaret studied him. There was something in his face, exhaustion, mixed with determination, and something else. Desperation, maybe, or shame. "What's your name?" "Marcus. Marcus Webb." "Where are you?" "From Marcus Webb? Everywhere. Nowhere." He shifted his weight. "I was Army. Did 3 tours in Afghanistan. Been drifting since I got out." "When did you get out?" 4 years ago. 4 years of drifting." Margaret knew what that meant. She'd seen it in other veterans around the county. The ones who couldn't settle, couldn't sleep, couldn't find their place in a world that no longer made sense. "I'm losing this farm in 3 weeks," she said. "Bank's auctioning it off. There's no point in hiring help. 3 weeks is 3 weeks. Looks like you could use a hand." She should say no, should send him on his way. But something in his eyes reminded her of David in the early days, before the farm, when he'd been lost and looking for purpose. "Barn? Needs cleaning," she heard herself say. "Loft is full of old hay. You can sleep up there. I'll feed you breakfast and dinner. That's all I can offer. That's more than enough." He worked like a man, possessed Dot by the end of the first day. Marcus had cleaned the entire barn, organized tools that had been scattered for months, and repaired the chicken coop door that had been hanging crooked since the spring. He barely spoke, just nodded when she brought him lunch. Went back to work. Dot at dinner pot roast she'd made from the last of her freezer meat. He ate in silence, until she asked him about his service. "Infantry," he said. "Saw a lot of combat. Lost a lot of friends." He stared at his plate. "Came home and couldn't figure out how to be a person anymore. Wife left. Couldn't hold a job. Started drinking." He looked up at her. "Been sober 8 months now. Trying to find my way back. Why farm work? Something about working with the land. With animals. It's quiet. Real. Makes sense in a way nothing else does anymore." Margaret understood that. The land didn't lie, didn't play games. You put in work, you got results, or you didn't. Either way, it was honest. Over the next week, Marcus transformed the farm. He fixed the tractor that had been dead for 2 months, replacing. A fuel line with parts he somehow scrounged. He repaired fences, patched the barn roof, cleared drainage ditches. He worked from sunrise to sunset, stopping only when Margaret insisted he eat. She found herself looking forward to their dinners. Marcus didn't talk much, but when he did, it was thoughtful. He asked about David, about the farm's history, about her plans. She told him the truth. She had none. After the auction, she'd find a room somewhere, maybe get a job at the grocery store in town. Start over at 55 with nothing. "That's not nothing," Marcus said one night. "You're still here. Still standing. That's something." On the 8th day, Tom Brennan came back. This time he brought company 2 men in suits who looked like they'd never touched dirt in their lives, and Carl Jenkins, the county sheriff. Margaret met them in the driveway, Marcus standing behind. Her, a hammer in his hand from the porch railing he'd been fixing. "Margaret," Tom said, his smile gone. "This is getting ridiculous. The auction is in 2 weeks. Just take my offer and get off my property. I'm trying to help you. These gentlemen are from the bank. They wanted to see the condition of the property before the auction. And Carl here," he gestured to the sheriff. "Carl's concerned about your ... visitor." Carl stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt near his pistol. "Ma'am, we've had reports of a vagrant on your property." I need to see some identification. Marcus set down the hammer slowly, pulled out a wallet, handed over a driver's license. Carl examined it, called something in on his radio. Mr. Webb, Carl said after a moment, says here you were dishonorably discharged. That's not true, Marcus. Sighed quietly. Medical discharge, PTSD. You can call the VA. Hum. And what are you doing here? Working for Mrs. Walsh. Tom laughed. Working? Margaret can't afford to pay her mortgage. How's she paying you? That's none of your business, Margaret said. It is when we're concerned about your safety. Tom's voice took on a false concern. This man is living on your property. You're here alone. Anything could happen. Margaret felt her face flush with anger. Marcus has been nothing but helpful and respectful, which is more than I can say for. You coming here with your threats disguised as concern. It's not a threat, it's reality. You're losing this farm, Margaret. Nothing this drifter does will change that. And having him here just makes you look more desperate, more incapable of managing your own affairs. The bank men walked around the property, taking photos, making notes. Carl kept watching Marcus, like he expected him to pull a weapon. Tom stood, there with his arms crossed, satisfaction oozing from every pore. After they left, Margaret found Marcus in the barn, packing his things. What are you doing? I'm making things worse for you. That sheriff's going to cause trouble. And Brennan is using me as ammunition against you. I don't care what they think. You should. Marcus zipped his backpack. They're looking for reasons to paint you as incompetent, as someone who can't take care of herself or her property. Having a homeless vet living in your barn plays right into that. So you're just going to leave? He stopped, met her eyes. I don't want to hurt you, Margaret. You've been kind to me, giving me a chance when nobody else would. I won't repay that by making your life harder. Margaret felt something crack inside her chest. Everyone left. Everyone gave up. David had died. Their daughter had never lived. And now this man, who'd somehow become a friend in just 8 days, was walking away too. I'm tired of people telling me what I can't do, she said. I'm tired of being treated like I'm too old, too weak, too broken to fight. If you leave, you're just proving them right. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then he unpacked his bag. That night, Margaret couldn't sleep again. She sat at the kitchen table with David's old farm journals, reading through 30 years of entries. His neat handwriting documenting each planting, each harvest, each struggle and triumph. In the margins, he'd written notes to himself, reminders. ENCOURAGEMDS. One entry from their worst year, the drought of '04, caught her attention. Some days you wonder if it's worth it. If all this work, all this pain, means anything, then you remember, it's not about what you grow. It's about refusing to let the hard years break you. That's the real crop. Resilience. Resilience. Margaret closed the journal and made a decision. Next morning, she drove into town. First stop, the library. She spent 3 hours on their computer, researching property law, auction procedures, bankruptcy options. She took notes, printed documents, built a plan. Second stop, the VA office. She spoke with a counselor, confirmed Marcus's story. Medical discharge, PTSD, honorable service. No criminal record. No reason for Carl's suspicion except prejudice. Third stop, the local newspaper office. Sarah Chun had been covering county news for 15 years. She was young, ambitious, and had a reputation for not backing down from powerful people. Margaret told her everything. Tom's lowball offers, the bank's rush to auction, Carl's harassment of Marcus, the systematic buying up of family farms by Brennan Development. How many farms has he bought in the last 5 years? Sarah asked, her pen flying across her notepad. 11 that I know of. All sold for a fraction of their value. All to families in crisis. And what's he doing with the land? Strip malls, gas stations, housing developments. He's erasing farm culture from this county, one desperate family at a time. Sarah leaned back in her chair. This is a good story, Margaret, but I need more than your word. I need documents, witnesses, proof. I'll get it. Over the next week, Margaret became a woman possessed. She contacted every family who'd sold to Brennan, collected their stories. She pulled county records showing property values versus sale prices in every case. Families had received 30 to 50% of market value. She documented the timeline of Brennan's acquisitions, showing a pattern of targeting families in crisis. Marcus helped, driving her around the county in her old pickup, providing quiet support as she knocked on doors and asked painful questions. Many families didn't want to talk. The shame of losing their land was too raw, but some did. And their stories were heartbreaking. The Johnsons, who sold after their son's accident, left them with medical bills they couldn't pay. The Rodriguez family, immigrants who'd bought their farm with decades of savings, forced to sell when a bad crop year coincided with the father's heart attack. The Petersons, who'd held out the longest, finally surrendering when their daughters. College fund evaporated, and Brennan offered just enough to keep her in school. Every story was different. Every story was the same. Families in crisis. Brennan swooping in with cash offers and promises, then flipping the land for triple the profit. He's a vulture, Marcus said as they drove back from the Peterson farm. He waits for people to be at their weakest, then exploits them. And he's about to do it to me. Not if we can help it. Margaret looked at him. We? Marcus kept his eyes on the road. You gave me a purpose, Margaret. First time in 4 years I've felt like I matter. Like what I do makes a difference. I'm not walking away from that. Not walking away from you. Something warm bloomed in Margaret's chest. Not romance. They were both too broken for that. But connection. Family. The kind you choose, not the kind you're born into. Thank you, she whispered. The auction was 5 days away when Sarah's article hit the front page of the county newspaper. Local developer accused of predatory land acquisition, the headline screamed. Below it, a photo of Tom Brennan at a ribbon cutting. Ceremony for one of his strip malls, smiling his too white smile. The article was devastating. Sarah had done her homework, documenting every acquisition, every lowball offer, every family left with nothing. She'd interviewed real estate experts who confirmed the properties had been worth far more than Brennan paid. She'd talked to town officials who admitted they'd fast-tracked his development permits in exchange for campaign contributions. And she'd featured Margaret's story as the lead example, a widow being forced off land she'd spent 30 years building. Offered a pittance while Brennan stood to make millions. The town exploded. By noon, Margaret's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Neighbors calling to offer support. Former farm families calling to share their anger. Reporters from regional papers calling for interviews. And 3 calls from lawyers offering to represent her pro bono. Tom Brennan called too. His voice was ice. You've made a big mistake, Margaret. You think a newspaper article changes anything? You still can't pay your mortgage. The auction still happens. And when I buy your land, and I will buy it, I'll make sure you don't see a penny more than the bank is owed. You'll walk away with nothing. We'll see, Margaret said, and hung up. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. A car pulled up to the farm, and another, then another. Within an hour, 20 people had gathered in Margaret's yard. Former farm families, current farmers, town residents who'd been priced out by Brennan's developments. They'd come to help. Over the next 3 days, Margaret's farm transformed. Volunteers repaired buildings, painted fences, cleared fields. Someone donated. seed for a late-season planting. Someone else brought chickens to replace the ones she'd sold. A mechanic tuned up her equipment for free. A lawyer filed motions to delay the auction, arguing the bank had failed to follow proper notification procedures. Marcus coordinated it all, his military training evident in how he organized work crews, delegated tasks, kept everything running smoothly. Margaret watched him come alive, purpose replacing the haunted look in his eyes. On the evening of the third day, as the volunteers packed up to leave, Margaret stood on her porch and addressed them. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For years, I've felt alone. Like David and I were the last ones who cared about preserving this way of life. But seeing you all here, seeing how you've come together, it gives me hope. Not just for my farm, but for all of us." An older man named Frank stepped forward. He'd lost his farm to Brennan 3 years ago. "You're not alone, Margaret. We let Brennan pick us off one by one because we were ashamed. Ashamed we couldn't make it work. Ashamed we were weak. But you showed us something. You showed us that fighting back isn't about being strong. It's about refusing to disappear quietly." The crowd applauded. Margaret wiped tears from her eyes. That night, she and Marcus sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the fields gold and orange. "You did this," Marcus said. "You brought all these people together. We did this. You and me. What happens if the auction still goes through?" Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Then I lose the farm. But I don't lose this." She gestured at the repaired buildings, the painted fences, the community that had rallied around her. "I don't lose the knowledge that I didn't give up, that I fought until the end. That's not nothing. No, it's not." The auction was scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m. Thursday night, Margaret got a call from her lawyer. The motions to delay had been denied. The auction would proceed as scheduled. Unless she could come up with 3 months of back payments, $15,000 by tomorrow morning, the farm would be sold to the highest bidder. She didn't have $15,000. She barely had $150. Margaret sat at the kitchen table, David's journals spread before her, and allowed herself to cry. Not just for the farm, but for everything. For David, gone too soon. For the daughter they'd never raised. For 30 years of work about to vanish. For the unfairness of a system that let men like Tom Brennan profit from other people's pain. Marcus found her there at midnight. "I heard," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. I really thought we could do it. I thought if we fought hard enough, if we showed them we wouldn't go quietly, that somehow ... Sometimes you do everything right and still lose. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No. It's supposed to remind you that losing this farm doesn't mean you failed. You've already won something more important." "What's that?" "Your dignity, your community, your refusal to be broken." He sat across from her. "And you gave me something too. You gave me a reason to stop running, to face my demons instead of hiding. From them, whatever happens tomorrow, you've already changed lives, mine included." Margaret reached across the table and took his hand. "Not romance, family. Thank you for staying. Thank you for letting me." Friday morning dawned cold and gray. Margaret dressed in her best clothes, a navy dress she'd worn to David's funeral, and drove to town with Marcus. The auction was being held at the county courthouse, a limestone building that had stood for 100 years, witnessing countless transfers of property, countless ends and beginnings. The auction room was packed. Margaret saw Tom Brennan in the hymn, front row, looking smug. She saw the bank representatives with their folders and calculators. She saw Sarah Chun with her camera and notepad. And she saw dozens of familiar faces, the volunteers who'd helped with her farm. Former neighbors, current farmers. The auctioneer called the proceedings to order at precisely 10 a.m. We're here today for the auction of property belonging to Margaret Walsh, 247 acres with improvements, located at The Door Burst Open. Frank, the older man who'd lost his farm years ago, strode in carrying a briefcase. Behind him came 5 other former farm families. They walked to the front of the room, and Frank opened the briefcase. "We'd like to make a payment on behalf of Mrs. Walsh," he said. He placed a check on the auctioneer's table. $15,000. Margaret's heart stopped. "Frank, what?" "We took up a collection," Frank said. "Everyone you helped over the years. Everyone who lost their farm and thought they were alone. Everyone who watched you fight and remembered what it felt like to have dignity. We pulled together what we could." The auctioneer examined the check, consulted with the bank representatives. Whispered conversation. Then he turned to Margaret. "Mrs. Walsh, this payment brings your account current. However, the bank is still owed a substantial sum. They're offering you one option. Agree to a payment plan for the remaining balance, or proceed with the auction today." Margaret looked at the faces around her. At Frank and the other families who'd scraped together money they probably couldn't afford to give. At Marcus, who'd stopped running to stand beside her. At Sarah, who'd exposed the truth. At the community that had rallied when she'd needed them most. "I'll take the payment plan," she said. Tom Brennan stood up, his face red. "This is ridiculous. She can't make those payments. Everyone knows it. You're just delaying the inevitable." "Maybe," Margaret said. "But I'm not making it easy for you anymore, Tom. I'm not disappearing quietly so you can profit from my pain. If you want my land, you're going to have to wait. And while you wait, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what you do, how you prey on desperate families, how you've built your empire on other people's suffering. You can't prove anything. I already did. Sarah's article was just the beginning. There are lawyers looking into your business practices now. Investigators. Examining your deals. You wanted to silence me by taking my farm. Instead, you gave me a platform." The room erupted in applause. Tom's face went from red to purple. He stormed out, his expensive shoes echoing on the marble floor. The auctioneer gavelled for order. "The auction is canceled. Mrs. Walsh, you'll need to meet with the bank to establish payment terms." Margaret nodded, barely able to process what had just happened. She'd kept her farm, not through her own resources, but through community, through connection, through refusing to be isolated and picked off like all the families before her. Outside the courthouse, people crowded around her, congratulating her, sharing their own stories of standing up to Brennan, planning next steps, forming a coalition to support struggling farms, pushing for county regulations on predatory land acquisition, creating a fund to help families in crisis. Margaret found Marcus at the edge of the crowd, watching with a small smile. "You did it," he said. "We did it. All of us. What now?" "Now we go home. We plant that seed the volunteers brought. We fix up the rest of the farm. We build something that lasts." She paused. "And you stay. If you want to, not as temporary help, as a partner, as family." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything. You helped save my farm, Marcus. Let me help save you." He pulled her into a hug, and Margaret felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, solid, unshakable hope. 3 months later, the farm was thriving. The late-season planting had yielded a modest crop, enough to make the first payment to the bank with some left over. Marcus had proven himself not just a hard worker, but a talented farmer, with ideas for diversifying their production, adding a vegetable garden, starting a small honey operation, raising heritage breed chickens for specialty markets. The coalition they'd formed had blocked 2 more of Brennan's attempted acquisitions, helping families negotiate better terms, or find alternative financing. Tom Brennan had quietly left the county, his business practices under investigation by state authorities. And Margaret had found something she thought she'd lost forever: purpose. On a crisp November morning, she stood in the field with Marcus, watching the sunrise over land that remained hers. The ache in her joints was still there, the grief over David still raw some days. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had Marcus, who'd stopped running and started building. She had a community that had learned to fight back together instead of suffering in isolation. She had a future. "David would have liked you," she said to Marcus. "He always said the best people are the ones who've been broken and put themselves back together." Was he one of those people? We both were. That's why. We understood each other. She turned to Marcus. "That's why I understand you." Marcus nodded, his gaze on the horizon. "I used to think I'd lost everything that mattered. My career, my marriage, my purpose. I thought I was just surviving, waiting to die. Then I met you, and you showed me that sometimes losing everything is just clearing space for something better, something real." They stood in comfortable silence, two broken people who'd found each other at the exact right moment. Not romance, but something deeper. Chosen family. Shared purpose. The knowledge that they'd faced the worst and survived. That afternoon, Sarah Chun came by to do a follow-up story. She photographed Margaret and Marcus working in the field, interviewed them about the farm's progress, asked about their plans for the future. "We're thinking of offering apprenticeships," Margaret said, "for veterans like Marcus who are looking for a new path, for young people who want to learn farming. We can't pay much, but we can offer knowledge, community, purpose. Teaching the next generation," Sarah said. "I like it. Someone taught us. Someone gave us a chance when we needed it. Now we pass it on." The article ran the following week, accompanied by a photo of Margaret and Marcus standing in front of the barn, tools in hand, smiles on their faces. The headline read, "From Near Loss to New Beginning, How One Widow Saved Her Farm and Started a Movement." The farm became a symbol, not just of one woman's fight, but of what's possible when people refuse to be isolated, when they stand together against systems designed to exploit their vulnerability. Other counties started forming similar coalitions. State legislators proposed new protections for family farms. The conversation shifted from inevitable decline to community resilience. And through it all, Margaret and Marcus worked. They planted and harvested. They fixed and built. They welcomed apprentices and shared knowledge. They created something that would outlast them both, not just a farm, but a model for how to survive in a world that often seemed designed to break you. One evening, a year after the auction that never happened, Margaret sat on her porch with a cup of tea, watching Marcus teach a young veteran how to repair a fence. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. The chickens clucked in their coop. The fields rustled in the breeze. She thought about David, about how he'd written in his journal that resilience was the real crop. He'd been right, but it wasn't something you grew alone. It was something you built together, with people who understood that sometimes the only way to survive is to refuse to let each other fall. Her phone rang. Another family facing foreclosure, another call for help. Margaret smiled and answered it. "Tell me your story," she said. "Let's figure this out together," because that's what you did. You remembered what it felt like to be alone and desperate. And then you made sure nobody else had to feel that way. You took the kindness shown to you and multiplied it, passed it on, built something bigger than yourself. You refused to forget, and you never, ever stopped fighting.